Good evening, everyone. Sorry that we're a few minutes late. We had a little bit of a delay on the technology side this evening. Who do we actually have here today in the audience? We have Seth. Who else? Oh, there's Guido. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for putting that up. A nameless boss of yours won't do that for me. All right. Let's go ahead and get going today. Thank you for the hard copies. First off, this is actually very pleasant, a surprise. So I'll do a call to order. That would be you.
Oh, okay. Chair Woodson,
Here.
Vice Chair Walton,
Here.
Rana, Jacobson, Barron, St. John,
Here.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yeah. So we have a quorum of exactly 4, which is what we needed tonight. All right, next up is, call order to this, is moment of silence and the pledge. Would somebody like to do that tonight? All right. Go ahead. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible,
with liberty and
justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. All right, next up is we actually have special announcements and communications from the floor. So we have a formal item on the announcement side, and then we also want to do that first, or do we want, and then we'll open it up to the public if they want to speak. Okay.
Okay, so the City of Marina's Recreation and Cultural Services Department is building an inclusive playground. This playground will be built on community input and will feature stuff like for children and adults with mobility limitations, sensory processing disorders, visual and auditory impairments, and developmental and cognitive delays. And we really want this playground to be based on community input. So upcoming event is Design Day. Could you scroll down, Nick? One more. So we're going to be having a designer at this event, and we're looking to get feedback from all children. So at this event, we'll have activities to get feedback from the children on how to build the playground. So we're hoping that a lot of people could show up to this event. So if you know people that would like to attend or volunteer for the project, click on the QR link and then send it to people you know. Yeah. What does it say? It's going to be April 14th at 6:30 p.m. in Community Center.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's a great idea. This is going to be a massively big project to pull off, but once it's done, is going to really be a regional draw, which is nice that we are moving towards just kind of the insular what we provide to the city and looking across the region to draw people in. So, great. Thank you so much. All right. At this point, since we're still open to the public, communications from the floor, we have Anybody in the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda today? Wow, this stone face look. This is why he doesn't put these up on the screen, because then I can see them. All right. So nothing there. All right. So Commissioner Walton, you have an announcement.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to announce that on April 2nd, Monterey County Green Party, the Coalition of Justice, the Coalition for Just and Equitable California, Fort Ord, Environmental Justice Network, and BlackAF.net held a town hall for reparations for the Black American Negro freedmen, descendants of those emancipated from the institution of enslavement in the United States. With regard to AB 1315 to establish a Freedmen's Bureau and SB 515 to get both city and counties to in California to come into alignment with the state in disaggregating the information regarding the descendants of the enslaved and being able to target services to that population. And we will be having future town halls in the future. And also we are petitioning the county supervisors to set up a Monterey County reparations commission. So if you want more information, please do email me at kaleolani.aw@gmail.com. Thank you. Oh, and also go to CJEC, that's cjec-official.org, and californiareparations.info for more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't get a lot of comments, and now we had multiple ones today. All right. Okay, next up on the agenda today is ex parte communications for quasi judicial matters. Does anybody have anything that they would like to discuss or mention? Okay. Negative on that. All right, moving on. So today we have on the consent agenda, the only thing we have is approval of the minutes from our March 13th meeting. Anybody have any comments or changes they wanted to bring up from the minutes? Okay, make a motion. Somebody would like to, I'll just make the motion. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for March 13th. All right, Commissioner Chang seconds. Take a vote.
Sure. Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Vice Chair Walton,
Yes.
Chair Woodson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes. All right. Now for the fun things, which I think we have two here and then two information briefs. All right, next up is public hearings for today. We have three items on the public hearings. We have actually conditional use permit, inclusionary housing code change, and a proposed change to code on childcare zoning. Go ahead and I guess, Brian, you got the presentation to us on Paul Davis Drive.
Is that on? Okay. Hello again. I'm back. I'll be presenting on 3344 Paul Davis Drive, units 3 and 4. They're applying for a conditional use permit. Next slide, please. So the project location is on Paul Davis Drive. It's on the northern side of the city. Next slide. So on the site plan, this location will be taking up 2 units. There's a loading and bottling area, and there's also a wine events area in the blue. General plan dedicates this as light industrial service commercial, and the zoning is business park and planned industrial small lot combining district. Next slide, please. On February 14th, applicant applied for a conditional use permit to allow the light manufacturing use of wine production and incidental wine sales, wine tastings by appointment, and wine events by appointment. On March 11th, Police Commander Richard Cox confirmed that the police department had no concerns or comments regarding the proposed use at the location. Next slide, please. The proposed hours for the use of wine production and winemaking are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And this will be occurring sporadically indoors with no public access and some occasional forklift activity outside for loading and unloading. And outside, there's also a storage area for each tenant with occasional deliveries that will be made. And I like to inform that there are other wineries within this plaza, so it will have similar impact for the proposed use. Next slide, please. And in accordance to the main use, there's also going to be incidental wine tasting and events by appointment, and the proposed hours for this are from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m., usually on weekends, with plans to eventually do weekdays as time passes. Next slide, please. And for these events, the applicant was also able to get a shared parking agreement with all the other tenants. So there's 28 parking spaces and 2 handicap spaces at the facility, with the proposed time from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Mondays through Fridays, and 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. Next slide, please. So here is the recommended motion, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions. Any comments, questions from other commissioners first? That's fine. We're all close enough today. Commissioner Chang, you have.
Thank you, Chair. I understand this COU is for the wine productions, bottling, and tasting and events. And also is by appointment, correct? So my concerns are kind of the traffic and the noise and the events, and also the safety, and also, and the class 1 classification. So my question is, looking at the information that's given to us, the operating hours is from 8. It's from 8 to 8, correct?
7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
All right, and also the wine tasting event is from is it 8 to 10?
12 p.m. to 5 p.m., usually on weekends.
For the wine tasting,
Mm-hmm.
and the event will be also
By appointment, and it's not frequent. It's by appointment. It's going to be sporadic, so
Okay.
not often.
and only restricted to 5 events per year.
I think it's one per. There's one per week. I thought.
I thought it's 5. Somewhere you mentioned
It's no more, they're planning on no more than one per week to start. Or one, that's it. I said one per week, one per day.
1 per day.
So right now, the appointments will be going to small groups, typically no more than one per day, but it's actually not. So typically, it means it's not restricted to that. That's their expectation.
I thought I read somewhere, so.
There's not going to be appointments like every day. It's going to be sporadic, not often.
And how big will the group, any restriction on the groups?
So just to call your attention to condition of approval number 13, the events shall be limited to no more than 5 per year. And those are going to be limited to no more than 60 people based on the number of parking spaces provided at the site.
Okay, I went down looking at the site. My comments will be 60 people. It seems that will be pretty crowded. And also 5 events per year, and also you have allowed parking until 10 p.m. If the events is only on the weekend, then why do you allow parking until 10 p.m.? that I don't understand. And the other thing I also, the concern is the alcohol, will be serving and the, staff. Are the staff, will they be certified by, responsible beverage services?
The staff is mainly the winemaker, and he is on the call, so he can answer these questions as well. His name is Bill. If you want to comment.
Okay. And the other thing is, I know you put under the sequel class 1. If they are expanding, then class 1 is very negligible, expansions. So would that be adequate for them?
The class 1 CEQA exemption is for existing buildings, so they're not expanding the building.
Okay.
They're simply utilizing 2 existing tenant spaces within the building.
So the tenant, no, right? You'll be restricted. Yeah, I just don't want later on they say, I want to build, I want to extend it or.
Yeah, if he wants to expand this operation to 3, a third tenant space, then he would have to come in and modify this use permit.
So the only things I see the request on your conditional use is, I think the operating hours, it could restrict it to 8 to 6 PM instead of, to 8 PM. That's my, suggestions. All right. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Let me table it coming. I'll come back to him in a minute or two, because I have a question along those lines. Do either of you have questions? Okay, so my question is that we've got Sinecure. I think I'm probably massacring the name. Winery, that's the other, they're the one that's in there with Urban Wine Row. Do they currently, I don't know the answer, because I know I bought barrels from them, but do they currently have a tasting capability also right now, correct? If I remember right?
That is part of their use permit. They have 2 locations for tasting rooms in other parts of Monterey County, so they don't actually utilize it anymore. They utilize their tasting room facilities in Monterey and Carmel by the Sea.
But however, I thought that the fact that they don't utilize it, I thought it was used for a number of years.
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, they've just decided for their own purposes to use
It's
other locations.
It's a business decision to not bring
Yes,
people to
correct.
Marina and go where their clientele is. Now, the reason I ask though, is that it's sitting in a commercial park that's the boundary business is the American Legion. Between that, the residential area not. So and there's a large fence that isolates off the area. So the only reason I ask about Sinecure and is that there was never, I don't believe, I remember because it's been a few years since we talked about this, that there was ever an issue or complaint on their use permit when they had wine tasting there. That's kind of precedent.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. And that is one of the reasons why when we there have been several wineries in this location
Right.
and going through the same permit process. That is why we held an internal staff meeting with the other department heads, specifically fire and PD, to ensure that police didn't have any issue with this concentration or this particular use.
Okay. All right. That said, now we'll go to the developer plan submit. I can't even get my words right today. What's the word I'm looking for?
Public comment?
Public comment, specifically the applicant. I was like petitioner, it's not petitioner, it's applicant. So go to the applicant and I think Commissioner Chang had a question that was very geared towards the applicant. So now I want to go ahead and ask a question, but I wanted to have kind of context.
Okay, Bill, you're on the call. Are you able to speak, Bill?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thanks
Okay,
for joining us.
perfect. Yeah, so I have an ABC license and I have taken the RBS certification. And yes, it's primarily going to be me, and anybody else that would be pouring would be, have that RBS, responsible beverage service, training.
So I think Commissioner Chang's question was very, I think, more on the lines of the number, the capacity at 60, and then why setting the time. I think some of the concern was setting the time at 8 PM instead of a little earlier time, instead of 6 PM.
I suggest 6 p.m. instead of 8 p.m.
That's for the shared parking
That's
agreement,
for the shared
correct?
parking, but I think but the party, if he had wine tasting itself, if I get it right, I just want to make sure I'm right, that would be between 12 and 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess what I'm trying to get to is because it's not in the petition, it's up to one event per day, but 5 events per year, or are they two different independent issues?
They're two different things. So
That's what I
wine,
thought.
wine tasting is by appointment is going to be small groups of people tasting wine. And then you'll have wine events. And Bill, if you want to speak to your winery program, and if you want to just give a little bit of an overview
Yes.
of your
Thank you.
use, I think that would help the commissioners understand it better.
Yeah, certainly.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, I do small lot, high-end winemaking. And the plan would be to host small groups, typically 2 to 4 people, starting on the weekends with, eventually during weekdays. But I'm pretty busy with a lot of other projects. So it's, I'm not going to be there daily, really trying to, make it a crazy town there as far as the amount of activity. It's more thoughtful and small, focused, controlled, because yeah, when you have, too many people, too much activity, it just breeds more drama and chaos. So the idea is my wife and I can handle the events. And right now, I don't foresee many events really for quite some time, but I negotiated a longer term lease. And so down the road, if there's an opportunity for events, I just wanted to be sure that at the ground level, we're all on the same page of what's reasonable and appropriate for that location.
Okay, so I think I'm going to ask Commissioner Chang if so what are your concerns with ending it? I mean, right now, the regular basically the wine tasting is looking from 12 to 5. The 8 PM from 5 to 8 would be, especially if it was a larger event, it would also be, I would assume, the catering and tear down from the event. And that's the shared parking. But
Hours, the proposed hours, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. were specifically wine production
right,
and wine making. It was his private production hours, not public.
Not the events hours.
Now, this
And
the event,
7 a.m. to 8 p.m. is production hours, not public tasting or selling.
Bills, do you see, thank you for sharing with us. Do you see any possibility you will do outdoor events?
well, that's the area in blue. So the area in blue,
Yeah.
where the wine events are, that's actually an outdoor area
Okay.
right here.
Hmm.
That's actually where for the larger events, that's where it would be.
Thank you.
And those are not parking spaces either. So it's basically carved out specific for that use by the landlord, and he's agreed to that as well.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry. On exhibit B, item 12. Event hours not included setup from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. And what is this hours for? Is that for event or is for operations?
It would be certainly for operations which are primarily indoors. There will be periodic truck receival with grape harvest. Sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes, in the evening, there might be a little bit of forklift activity. But as far as the events, a typical event, if it's a special event, may only be a couple hours, but say, um, I have a group of architects that want to do a little tasting event, bring in a caterer. It would be, say, 2 to 3 hours, and they may say, "Hey, Bill, can we do it from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.?" Okay, great. But as they share, there's cleanup, there's other activities thereafter. But yeah, I don't want to be competing with the local bars in Marina as far as business late at night. That's not my intent.
Okay. I just want to make sure it's not running it to 10 p.m. at night. And it's kind of late. And I know.
I agree, and
Yeah. I know for normally wine
that's
tasting, most of the shop, they have it until maybe 7 p.m. And there's only one in Carmel until 9 p.m. I think the latest. That's my question.
correct. And yeah, and
What I would,
certainly I don't want to pour alcohol before 12 p.m. on most days. I'm not looking to do that anytime soon. I think the first few years the plan would be kind of that. If it's on the weekdays, it would be that kind of late afternoon for maybe one or two appointments tops, and then on the weekends probably 12 to 5. The events take a long time to build up, and it's a small operation. I don't have employees, so it's really just my wife and I what we're able to handle, and we're very busy with our other affairs. But if there's big events, concourse weekend, a lot of people are in town in the peninsula. Oh, great! They can come by for a tasting. When they make an appointment, and so I really want to be a value add proposition to the town, to the community. Really, be a community space where I can integrate, architectural, clients, and other vendors to bring their, good customers, and just have a cool space that really ties the wine industry with the community.
Just one more questions about the waste disposal. Do you have a plan how to dispose the waste?
Yeah, so the solid waste, like the grape skins and such, my plan is to collect that in a trailer and haul that to the landfill for composting. I also have connections with local composting companies as well. And I even have my own vineyard that, if need be, I can compost it there. As far as the liquid waste would be indoor via sewer. And my production is super small. It's going to be probably, let's see, a couple thousand cases to start. And the goal is to be very little, water generation from cleaning activities and such.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure. Thank you.
any other questions? Redirect? Okay. Anybody else in the public? All right, so I'll go ahead and close public comment at this point. And did that answer your questions? Yes. Yeah. All right. don't think there's much to discuss here, really. Are you fine with it right now? Okay. Then I would go ahead and if somebody would like to make a motion. Could you put the motion back up? Thanks.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll make the motions. I move to adopt PC Resolutions 2025-05, approving condition use permit, CUP, CU 25-001, allowing light manufacturing for wine production with incidental wine sales, wine tasting by appointment, and wine events by appointment at 3344 Paul Davis Drive, Unit 3 and 4, APN 033-281-020, subject to the findings, conditions of approval, and the Class 1, Section 15301 sequel exemptions for existing facilities.
I'll second.
Yeah, we have Commissioner Chang made a motion, Vice Chair Walton seconded. Go ahead and take a vote.
Sure. Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Vice Chair Walton,
Yes.
Chair Woodson,
Yes,
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
motion passes. Bill, thank you very much for taking the time to kind of explain that side of it. I think it's really to your point, now that we have, I guess it'd be 3 now wineries in that little area, that it would be kind of
Yes.
nice to see all of you work together and try to do something for some of the bigger peninsula weekends to get people out here. I mean, it'd be good for you all, but I think it'd be great for our city too, to leverage the growing number of homegrown wines and, well, I'll add that other alcohol and beer that we have actually here also in Marina. So great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. I'll have to come over and try one of your bottles from your 2000 cases. All right,
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
sure. Next up on the agenda is review of our things out of order. We have, which code? There it is. All right, so we have proposed changes to municipal code on inclusionary housing. Which we're going to present that to us.
Yeah, I'll be presenting that, Chair Woodson.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Thank you for asking. So
Good.
So tonight we'll be bringing a very, very simple, no, I'm not, next slide? I don't think that's the right one, Nick. Mine is 2.4 of the housing element. So I don't, unfortunately, I have a presentation. I had a little bit of a crazy week this week, so I'm just going to be a very brief presentation. So just as an overview, what's an inclusionary ordinance? An inclusionary ordinance is just a mandate from a city that when you build a housing project, that a certain percentage of the units go to low and moderate income folks. So if you have a 100-unit project, 20% of those generally would go towards affordable housing units at different income levels. So since I've been here, there's been an inconsistency with our code. The former Fort Ord has a 40% inclusionary requirement, while the rest of the city and the big 3 projects have a 20% requirement. And so this is our continuing effort to update our municipal code to keep our housing element certified. So one of the action items from HCD that we have to implement is removing that inconsistency so that there is a 20% inclusionary throughout the entire city. That's a pretty standard, anywhere from 15 to 25%, but typically about 20% inclusionary is the requirement. And then the only other major change to our ordinance is dropping the requirement down to currently, if you have to have more than 20 units to be subject to the ordinance, and now we're dropping it to 5. So more projects will be required to comply with the ordinance, and we'll actually get more, hopefully, projects spread out throughout the city, as opposed to just the big three projects. Rather unique are so in addition to asking for an ordinance change today from the commission or a favorable recommendation, rather unique are the inclusionary requirements are also found in a section of the general plan. So we do also have to ask the commission to do two actions tonight. One, to make the ordinance change, and then two, to adopt a resolution or recommend adoption of a resolution to make the change to be 5 units or more are subject to the inclusionary ordinance. So that concludes my very, very brief presentation.
Thank you. I think that was pretty straight. Yeah, to me, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, all we're doing is really we're just increasing the number of developers that will be covered.
That's correct.
So I kind of wish it would cover a couple of our developers, smaller middle-sized ones that we had already approved in the last couple of years, but it is better late than never to get this in place. So I think on the general plan side, that's the inclusionary housing one. So my question on the general plan motion, we are making an adjustment to the 2005 amended general plan, which makes sense because we have to do that. Will this be in the new built into the new general plan, or will we remove it, or will we be removing it from the new general plan and just falling back on our legislature?
Oh, you know what? Actually, that's a good question because I don't know. Let me check out that's a really good question. Let me see how I wrote the ordinance because I wrote the ordinance. 1 second. I've got the ordinance. So I have the ordinance up. 1 second.
Sure.
Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, I did rewrite it. So let me pull that up for the commission. So I'm trying to pull this up from home. 1 second. Yeah. So actually I did write it in there. All 5 units or more. So that's a good point. Yeah. So actually, yeah, when we adopt the new general plan in the next 18 months, then presumably that won't be in there. But for now, we need to make that inconsistency. And then we did put it in the draft ordinance. So that's a good catch on the chair's part.
Okay. I mean, that was my primary question when I was reading through all this. I mean, to me, this is the next logical step for us. Any other commissioners have questions? Yes, Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, just a quick one for Guido.
Yeah.
Going back to that slide you just put up, the second dot or the dot B. Yeah. Explain how existing housing falls into inclusionary. Is this like rental units all of a sudden? If you have a 5-unit apartment that's already here for years, they now have to make 1 unit inclusionary rental.
No, and that's actually a good catch. I didn't catch that when we were drafting it. I mean, that's just a carryover from the current ordinance. We could potentially even strike that from the ordinance if the commission wants. So,
Okay.
because remember the ordinance, the ordinance that I inherited, the ordinance that I inherited bifurcated Fort Ord from the rest of the city, and I think that's just a carryover. So we can certainly strike that. So,
okay, thank you.
Good catch. So if the commission wants to add that to the motion, so to strike 1748030 B1B.
Let me think about that for a second.
So just so I'm clear, that would be like Preston Park
That's what I'm thinking, is that it's
and
Preston Park
Abrams.
is specifically
Right.
what it was designed around.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And the way I read it, and this is so the reason I'm not, that I'm kind of in between. We can't, the way it's written right now, the way this reads is existing occupied housing in Marina's former Fort Ord, which is somewhat, to your point, restricted. But what it does mean, if I understand reading B correctly, if we had a developer who had more than 5 units and they wanted to put in a change, then we could enforce this on them and say, with your change, we want you to go to a low income. And that's the way I read this.
Yeah,
The
I don't know
challenge-
if that, yeah,
So the twofold challenge with number one is that, to your point, it bifurcates the city of Marina now into, oh, well, if you're part of the old area with Fort Ord, you get this, you're the only small section, which is basically, again, to, I think, Commissioner Walton's point, that it's really, it's very patent, it's very Preston Park, which seems not fair from an equity standpoint.
If I might, through the chair, Guido, the proposed land use map now for the general plan update does suggest infill development in the Preston Park and Abrams areas, which are owned by the city. So in my professional opinion, I would recommend actually leaving that in as it is, because there could be future potential development out at the Preston Parks Abram, and we would want them, whoever it is, the city or a private developer, to provide this inclusionary zoning that's
So the
being,
question about that though is if we're still limiting it to Preston Park, why wouldn't we just strike the prepositional phrase in Marina's former Port Ord and just say, and turn that into a existing occupied housing areas in the city of Marina? So that no matter where the development is, it is helping force an issue on changes in development. So because we have had developments come before the commission that are renovations or changes to development, that not many, that have more than 5 units involved. And if we made it the entire city, then those other areas would have had to come into compliance with this. The way it's written right now, the only place for infill that we're forcing this requirement onto is Preston Park.
yeah, I wasn't anticipating us going in this direction. Yeah, I mean, we're really just, if you build a new project with 5 or more units, then you're subject to the ordinance. I don't think if somebody has 5 units now and they add a 6th or 7th, that we would be, some cities make them pay a in lieu fee for the difference, but we don't have that fee in place. So, yeah, this is really generally, like Allison mentioned, for, maybe for a newer project. I mean, we're not gonna, yeah, so that's the general intent, so.
So I understand it. I'm just not sure I agree that striking it is the right answer. I think I'm more towards what Allison is leaning towards.
That's
All right, so we've got 2 opinions on this. Commissioner Chang,
We
go on.
had another example.
Sure.
It's a possible example. What is the terminology for these 25 or so lots that were formerly flood control? What do you call that?
The retention basins.
Retention basin lots. The city owns
Stormwater.
some 25 of them. And we've talked off and on about an opportunity. These are no longer, my understanding that they're no longer required for flood retention. And so if they were backfilled and brought level again, then a developer could develop lots. And
Mhm.
could this not be part of the well, it's not existing occupied housing, but it's existing infill lots.
Yeah.
But I think that,
yeah,
that would
the
fall
ord-
underneath.
yeah.
I'm going.
The ordinance, people would be if they build more than 5, they would be subject to the
Yeah,
ordinance.
but that would be applicable to to 21A, not 21B. So if you could even put, I don't think you could actually put 5 into each. I think you can only put 3 or 4 into each of those, but maybe depending on how if they're built as townhouses or not. But I think either way, if you took one of those would actually fall underneath 1A, all residential developments of 5 or more units versus 5B, which is an existing area, because those would be creating new homes. That's not renovating or modifying current existing
Okay.
complexes. And
Well, I
Commissioner.
was just trying to figure out how
Oh, yeah,
to
absolutely.
preclude a current 5-unit or 6-unit apartment. If they don't modify it, then does it all of a sudden become rent controlled for 20%?
Right. Well, and I think, Guido, coming back to Allison's point on leaving it in, the general plan has that area of Marina, or the Preston Park area of Marina, designated for possible infill. And as part of that, it would be the same thing. That's new development. It doesn't matter if it's Preston Park or not. It's still going to be new development as infill. And if it's over 5 units, it would still have to fall underneath 1A. 1B does not lower the requirement below 5. It's still the overriding requirement is going to be 5 units or more. And so I think the infill example is an existing area, but new projects versus a rehabilitation or a renovation of an existing project.
Yeah, but I don't know if Preston and Abrams is really the template, because I understand from
Right.
the city manager that those rents are kept purposely artificially low. Those are significantly below the market rates. That was
Right.
intentional on the city's part as the property owner. Yeah, I don't know yeah, and more than likely there would be some type of master plan for that. And,
Right.
there would be, I mean, just from the community support for that area, just from the 3 years that I've been in Marina, either it would fall under this ordinance or as part of the master plan development, there would be some type of inclusionary requirement. So I don't know if that's the most
No, so
apple to apple comparison. So,
well, the big thing is we've come up with 3 or 4 different examples now, and we can't get any of them to create a real exception to carve out B. So if those are the most common ones, ultimately they all fall back on A, 5 or more units. And because there's 5 or more units are applicable to any place in the city. So if we get rid of B, B is just getting rid of a small subset of our city. So I think to what Commissioner St. John said, I understand why. I think I understand why it's there, but I would agree that we could probably strike that from, we could just strike it because it opens up more questions than it answers. It creates a conversation piece for people who want to try to figure a way around it.
that's true.
There isn't, other than Preston and Abrams Park, there isn't any other existing occupied housing in former Fort Ord, is there? Not that we-
Actually, Allison worked on the project off of Bennett, the interim housing project. Allison, how many?
Those are within the Preston and Abrams.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah,
got it. Okay.
they were originally part of Patton Place, now Preston Park.
That's a good point.
So I think, yes, go on, Commissioner Chen.
Fredo, it's just a general question about this inclusionary requirement, 20%. How is it compared to our neighboring city, Seaside and Salinas and Monterey?
I'm glad you asked that. I did research that. So let me pull up my staff reports. I had to put a little footnote so I could remember. 1 second. So, city staff confirmed have an inclusionary 20% Seaside, Monterey, Salinas. And then, well, I was searching through the housing element action items, Pacific Grove and Carmel by the Sea. My notes had them, they were approximately that percentage. I thought the Carmel one was a little bit higher, if I recall. So that's a footnote on page 2 of my staff report. So.
So how far are we doing with?
And
this
by the way, I do
plan?
appreciate the question because, you know, as a city employee, we always try to, we get that question a lot, and we try to just generally be consistent with industry standards. And so, you know, yeah, thank you.
With the present market situations, the 20%, I think, according to your experience, does it discourage builders coming over here to Marina?
You know, kind of in a wait and see mode for this. I'm hoping we can get the ordinance adopted, and then I'm working with our finance department to do an economic study of downtown. So this will be part of that analysis. If it is a hindrance, then we might have to come to council. It wouldn't go to commission because it's a fee. We might have to adopt the in lieu fee in lieu of doing the 20%. So I'm kind of in a wait and see mode, but that is a good question.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think what we want to do is we want to modify the motion to strike Roman numeral 2, number 1, subparagraph B, existing occupied housing in Marina's former Fort Ord, and remove that from. Otherwise, so
Sounds good. I'll pull up the motion. And then...
Well, a couple things. First, we have to do public comment.
Oh, thank you.
But before that, we need under the government code, we need a written recommendation on the general plan amendment, which I don't think we've discussed yet, as distinct from the ordinance revision. And that means a resolution of the planning commission, but there isn't one provided. So I'm wondering if we can pull that up for the planning commission so they can see written recommendation.
Sep, we have it in the packet.
I don't see it there.
Yeah, I can share.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because your law firm helped edit the.
Right, I remember helping write it.
Sorry, that's the rules. 1 second, give me a second. Where did I? Sorry, doing this at home.
Because it's in findings exhibit A.
Yeah, I'm trying to. 1 second. Pop up. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's the resolution, and I put it on the agenda, and then it's also in my staff report.
This is a city council resolution. So we need the
Oh,
That's
okay,
the point.
got it,
Yeah.
got it. Because I always do the draft stuff. Got
right.
it.
So we have one. We have one. I'm hoping we can just put it up on the screen. Because it was part of the packet. But
So
would it
what
help
we're
if I
basically saying is, so I didn't catch, thanks for catching that, Seth. What it's really saying is that we have it right, except that we copied into the packet 50 on page 52 of the packet, the city council one instead of the planning commission one.
No, but we have it in the staff report though, that they'll adopt the resolution.
Well,
though.
I don't think we can do that.
Yeah, the government code says that the recommendation needs to be in writing and contain the reasons for the commission's recommendation. So typically that's done by resolution, and that's why you have all the whereases that kind of give the background, and then the rationale. If not for that government code provision, we could just have the commission, make a motion to recommend that the council adopt the council resolution.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we do have this government code requirement for general plan amendments, which is part of this item.
Right.
I mean, if we have to, we can take a 10-minute pause and I can crank out 2 or 3 recitals.
Well, we have it. I can just provide it.
That's fine. That's
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. And why don't we go to public comment while we do that?
That's fine.
Excuse me though, but have we discussed the general plan amendment item aspect?
I did bring
We
it
did.
up in my initial
Okay.
presentation.
So
Great,
and I talked about it. That was before we got into the sidebar on the subparagraph B on former Fort Ord. That was the first part of the conversation we had, which was the issue of the general plan.
Got it. Okay. And then one more thing I wanted to raise.
Sure.
So can you go back to Chair Woodson when you were saying what the likely change in the motion, if it were made, would be? Where would that be?
So it's within. It says it won't be I don't believe it'll be the general plan motion. It'll be in it'll be in our code,
Ordinance.
municipal
It'll be in the
code,
ordinance.
and it's in the municipal code, section 17.48.030,
Mm-hmm.
paragraph B, subparagraph 1, subparagraph little b, existing occupied housing in Marina's former Fort Ord. It's page 48 of the packet.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And then it'll be striking that little b paragraph.
I see.
And then Sep, also Exhibit A to the resolution does have findings. So
So if I understand it right, at least some way I understood it before, but to make sure I'm still correct, is the first motion we have to make is to adjust the general plan, amend the general plan to address this. And then the second one is, once we amend that, then we're making a motion to adjust our municipal code.
That's right. If that's Guido's understanding, I think that the actions are recommend revising the ordinance, recommend amending the GP, and CEQA exemption.
right.
Does that make sense to everybody else? Commissioner Chang? Does it make sense to you too? Okay. So I think we all understand the process on our side. We just
And-
need to make sure we have it documented here correctly.
Yes, through the chair, Nick has pulled up the actual planning
Oh, look, it
commission
now has
resolution.
the one that says resolution of the planning commission, not
Correct.
resolution to the city council. Perfect. This reads better. I don't want their job. Their job means we have to stay here till 10 o'clock on Tuesday nights. All right. So, all right, I don't think I've officially closed I don't even think I opened public comment. So go ahead and open public comment. Is there anybody actually from the public here besides all of us? This is such heady subject material. It's very cool material and they just miss out. Okay. There's nobody online except, well, no, we have the really important people online. We have Guido and Seth. And we have a cat that's sitting outside that was sitting on the landing. And the cat looked like it was going to come in and had comment tonight, but I don't think so. So, okay, so I'm going to close public comment. And so I believe what we need is first thing we need to do is adopt the resolution 25 number to the planning commission. If you could put that back up on the screen. And that's going to be amending the 2000 general plan. Is there somebody who would like to make this motion?
Oh,
All right.
This should be the recommended motion in the packet with your suggested change as at the end.
recommended motion.
Hold on for a second. I want to make sure before we get started.
It's at the very end.
I know.
Oh, sorry.
I thought we had to make, so,
I guess I misspoke earlier. It's all included in the in the resolution already.
it's all in one place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So instead of doing two, we're just gonna do it, we're gonna do a
Just-
combined one at once.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to make sure that, right, because initially we talked about it being two. But the reality is the way this is written is it's actually going to cover both.
Yes, the planning commission resolution covers both. When this goes to the council, they will individually adopt their own resolution for the general plan amendment and their own ordinance for the municipal code amendment.
Got it. That's what I thought when I was reading this. I was like, okay, if this is what we're doing, then we're actually combining both together. So it's just one motion. Okay. All right. Sorry. Thank you. Now go ahead.
Okay. The recommended motion shall read, the planning commission hereby adopts PC resolution 2025-06, recommending that the city council adopt an ordinance amending the zoning code title 17 and a resolution amending section 5.7.2 of the 2000 general plan, both to implement program 2.4 of the housing element and find that the recommended action is exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15061, paragraph B, subsection 3, with a suggested change to strike 17.48.030.b.1.b, namely existing occupied housing in Marina's former Fort Ord. The end.
Is there somebody who'd like to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, Vice Chair Walton seconds that. Go ahead and take a vote.
Okay. Commissioner Walton? Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Vice Chair Walton.
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Chair Woodson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much, Guido and Steph, for helping clarify.
No, thank you. And I just, by practice, I'd been putting in the ordinance and the
Okay.
council reso, but thank you, Seth, for correcting me about that and just making sure we have the reso for the GPA. So thank you for that.
It's all good. We would have caught it when we read it and said city council because none of us want to be city council members. We like this role that we have.
No, thank you. Thank you for catching that, Seth.
So, all right. That was the third item, which I think is a little more simplistic, is to propose change to municipal ordinance on childcare zoning within the city. Back to you, Kim, I believe. You are the planner of the meeting.
Yep, it's all me today. So I'll be presenting on childcare municipal code amendments. Next slide, please. So staff found areas for zoning updates that would make it easier to have access to childcare and allow for easier establishment of daycare centers in Marina. Additionally, there is currently a concentration limitation for large or small family childcare homes that prevents the establishment of new large or small family childcare home within a 300-foot radius. Next slide, please. So here's what the current zoning looks like. Small family childcare, large family childcare, and daycare center. The small is 4 to 8 children, large is 12 to 14, and daycare center is 15 or more. And each zoning is highlighted by permitted, conditional use permit, and not permitted. Next slide, please. So here are the proposed changes. First is to allow for daycare centers as conditional use in R1 single family residential, R4 multiple family residential. And the second change is allow for daycare centers as a permitted use in C1 retail business, C2 general commercial, PC plan commercial, and BP business park. Next slide, please. So with the proposed changes, here is what the updated zoning would look like. So as you can see, it would allow a lot more access for daycare centers across all the zones. Next slide, please. And a third change is to remove the 300-foot radius concentration that limits large or small family childcare homes that prevents the establishment of new large or small family childcare. So as I talked about before, these are the 4 to 8 and the 12 to 14. And here's the recommended motion, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Just to refresh my memory, can you go back over R1, the difference between R1 and R4? And what we're changing? Please. One of the three of you, or Guido, just the different, remind the whole group. of the
So
difference between R1 and
R1
R4.
stands for single family residential district, and then R4 stands for multifamily
Multi-family, right.
residential district. So you have single family homes predominantly in R1, and then you have multifamily homes in R4.
Just that, yeah, higher density.
Higher density,
Right.
correct. So up to 35 units per acre. Mhm.
Now, I have a question. When you say the childcare homes, what's the difference between a childcare home and a daycare center?
Daycare centers is, like I mentioned, 15 or more. And then there's also a second part to that definition where daycare center also provides adult daycare facilities. So that is another aspect of that definition. But today I'm mostly focused on the childcare access.
So, and then what is a childcare home?
So the childcare home is focused on the children, and then the small would be 4 to 8, and then the large is 12 to 14.
So is this like in personal homes that people
Yeah.
are able to watch children in?
Yes,
And that's
Yeah.
new.
in an operator's own residence.
Okay. So, and that goes for people in apartments as well, or you have to own the home?
There's no requirement on ownership or rental.
Okay.
Questions from the commissioners?
Did I jump the gun?
No, no, that's fine. I was,
Oh.
I was gonna ask that. Go ahead. What's that?
One tiny question. Was there a recent state law that mandated this?
I don't think so.
No, there was a request from the community to consider it and to look at ways to potentially allow more daycare within the city. So that's where the request came from.
And I think also, if I go back 2 or 3 years,
Yes.
we actually raised it on the commission when we were going through pets. And I think that opened up the discussion on daycare and childcare at the time, that we asked you to look at this and eventually bring it back to us.
Your commission and the city council did actually, when I first started here, you recommended approval to some minor modifications to the code that eased regulations in regard to small and large family homes, but did not affect the daycare center.
Right. I remember that.
Just one follow-up, is there a licensing requirement for small, large and daycare?
There are state licensing requirements, I believe, for more than 6, so 7 or above. I believe that 6 or fewer, there's not a state license, but I'm about 99% sure about that.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Mr. Chang.
Okay, my question is, if we agree on these proposed changes and later on somebody come in and apply a childcare center in the business district, we can always reject it if it's just next to a paint shop or hardware store, correct? This doesn't give, it's not a blanket approval, correct?
So this would be changing the zoning code to allow
Conditional.
as a principally permitted use in those 5 commercial zones, the daycare center. So if this is approved and a daycare center came into a C2 zone, like a shopping center somewhere that is next to any other type of commercial use that's allowed in that zoning district, there would be no review by this. It's principally permitted, so it's a by right type of use.
Okay, that's my concern because childcare center is including children's and then parents driving there and picking up the kids. I have no problem having it in the residential area or the retail business district. But when come to 17.20 and 22, the commercial district, there may be some hardware store there and heavy equipment. And so I'm not sure I want to bring my kids to a childcare center next to a hardware store, you know. And so I do not know whether, is it okay just to make changes to allow 17.06, 17.12, 17.18, and not 17.20 or 22?
If that's the will of the full commission, then
Yeah, so,
Yes, if the
Let me
full
co-
commission wants to put that forth, that's how we would
so let me-
convey it.
Okay.
let me organize the conversation a little bit and organize it around the meeting note, the packet. So if anybody who has the packet, on page 57 of the packet is the proposed zoning, the allowed zoning currently and the proposed zoning. The bottom of the table on page 57 is changing 6 of the daycare center ones. And that's the main changes. And that's changing them on the residential areas to conditional in R1 and R4 and changing them, they're permitted in C1, C2, BP, and why do we have BP twice?
That's an error.
It should say PC, shouldn't it? Should say PC and BP.
yeah.
Okay,
That's
so it's okay. All right. Then if you go to starting on page 64, 63, 64. So if you start on page 64 of our packet through whatever page, probably 71 or 70,
Mhm.
you have the actual definitions of each of the 9 zone,
Hmm.
9 zoning districts that we have that it was
Mhm.
applicable to. So basically you could go to page 64 and you can read what the definitions of R1 are and provide that.
Right.
So that's what Commissioner Chang is talking about is specifics. That's from a conversation perspective, maybe this is how would like to lead the discussion on this. And I would say that I have, to Commissioner Chang's perspective, and I'm going to open it to the public and then we'll come back to discussion, is I do have thoughts on some concerns about potentially approving the conditional uses and the permitted side. Mainly, when we start getting into, I think we're fine on homes. But my challenge is that when we start getting into large childcare homes and we're looking at small as 4 to 8 children, but when we start getting the large, now we start getting to 12 to 14. And so one of my questions to come back to the staff on this one is going to be, when we look at the large side, I'm assuming also that as part of that, there are state guidelines on minimum square footage per child. And they're specific construction, there's specific permitted guidelines that say, okay, this is how many bathrooms you have, this is how much floor space you have per child and everything else. That actually gets overlaid on top of our zoning. So that if somebody came in and they had a little 1-bedroom, I'm gonna give worst case, they're in a residential multifamily or they're in a very small commercial property that is 400, 500 square feet, and they want to turn around and they want to have a large daycare with 12 kids. That it would not necessarily violate the zoning requirements, but it would violate the state's requirements on daycare. And they would not be able to allow that. So we're actually overlaying the zoning is just giving us the giving people approval to have one. It does not give approval to actually force the issue on a conditional use permit. And that's, I think, where my concern comes in is on the conditional and on the permanent side of creating a situation where conditional especially, where it comes back to us, where somebody puts in when they have to put in a conditional use permit, they come to us and then basically it's oh, we have to be the good guy or the bad guy trying to implement state policy on what is allowable or not allowable for a daycare. And it puts us and the city council into a very delicate situation in a very intractable problem that we have, which is daycare in this country and daycare in the state of California there's not enough and it is very expensive. And so the side of me, on one side is I completely support the idea of expanding capacity because there is a demand. The other side of it is I don't want to set something up where we're creating a have and have not. So that kind of said, I think we'll come back to discussion. Open it up to the public, which I think is still just Guido and Seth. And the cat. I'm going to name the cat. The cat's like, I have a litter of kittens and they're fine. They're out. So do either of you have any comments you would like to add to this? I don't know.
There's one member of the public.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. So coming back to this,
There is one member of the
Actually-
public now.
We actually do
There
have
is,
somebody
yeah.
online, so.
there is somebody.
Yeah.
Would they like to speak?
They can raise their hand if they'd like to speak. Yeah.
Welcome.
I'm not seeing any raised hands though.
It's the cat. It's actually not a person. The cat got on a line and wants to speak. All right. All right. So no, they didn't raise their hand, but they're here. So thank you for coming and joining in. Go ahead and close the public comment. But coming back to this issue, I think what I would maybe to guide the conversation, we have 6 specific areas that we're looking at changing it on the use on. And I think maybe what I'd like to do is just go through each of those areas. What's that?
If I might, right before you go into this next
Yes.
discussion, just point out that in your current and proposed zoning tables, getting back to your concerns about the small and large family daycare, we're not proposing changes to the way the code is currently written for
Okay.
small and large family
So we're only
daycare.
worried about the daycare, which is greater than 15 or adults.
Right, the daycare center.
So that is, which is the 15.
Yeah, in our zoning
So what
code,
you're
it's-
saying.
Yeah.
You're saying that currently the small and large facilities are currently a conditional use permit for R1 and R4?
They're actually,
Principally permitted.
they're principally permitted in all R1 through R4 and in
Oh,
commercial
okay.
and in CR.
Okay, so the only change is in the daycare.
The changes in the daycare center, and then the other change that does pertain to the residential zoning districts is removal or the proposed removal of that proximity,
The 300 feet.
the 300
Oh.
foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
yeah,
Okay. All right. So I want to start, I want to start with that piece of the conversation because I think Commissioner Chang addressed it a little bit from what was changed. But my question is coming back to the small family and large family childcare side of it. What was the rationale for not addressing it in C1 or C2 as a conditional use? And so, and the reason I'm thinking about it is if a typical example is we have a number of commercial properties that have challenges, that have larger spaces, but have challenges with tenants and are vacant. And right now, this would still not be allowable in those situations. Or would that be because at that point it would default to it would default to a daycare center type of model?
Yes, if I'm understanding you correctly, the small and large family childcare is in the residential home.
It has to be
It's
in the residential home.
it has to be
Not
where
this year.
the operator resides.
And that's why we have that's why it's not permitted in anything that's outside of residential.
Correct.
So that was my first question. I wanted to make sure I understood it correctly. So now that being said, we've got, I think it's relatively straightforward, but what I'd like to do is just go through each of the 6 recommended changes that we have, and then just walk through each of these and see if this all is logical and makes sense to us. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is with respect to the chair's last question with respect to the commercial zones. In the dunes, we have the mixed housing where residents would be living, and also it's a commercial zone. So so now my question is with respect to some permitting there, would we be able to? Or is this is a closed loop here? Bless you.
I do not have the answer to that off the top of my head. And the dunes is regulated by a specific plan, and I would imagine that the state laws that allow these large and small childcare homes relate to the residential occupation of that property. I don't know if Seth maybe has some insight on this. I do understand what you're talking about. It's a mixed use. And it's also under a specific plan. And I don't have the answer to that right off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Nor I, but we could certainly look into it.
I have I mean, I don't know either, but I would guess that the site-specific plans, since they probably preclude that type of development. Maybe. That's an interesting concept. It's like putting in ADUs into the site-specific ones that I'm sure they don't want, but it's a water issue more than it is anything else. Okay. All right. So the first one was we wanted to change R1, single-family residential, from not permitted to conditional use. My initial thought is I'm fine with that. I don't see an issue. I think that's if we go along theoretically with the concept of we want to open up capacity to demand, this is the easiest one to do because it's literally the most amount of space, and it's not in a multifamily higher density area. And yes, we might get some pushback from individual neighborhoods and neighbors, just like we do on parking and ADUs and all the other things that come before us. But from a community perspective, it makes the most sense to me. I think it's actually, of the ones, it's the easiest one for me to justify. Any other thoughts from the rest of the group?
Personally, I like this. I didn't know that we had the permissions before, and I'm glad to see them that they'll be expanding.
Yeah. I agree with Chair Woodson that seems perfectly normal to have a daycare center in a residential. I see it all over other cities, all over the state and all over other states.
So my only question I have go on.
So it wouldn't be that something that we would be inventing here.
Which leads to my actually only change that I actually been making right now is there a specific reason that we made it conditional instead of just permitted? You're smiling.
Really only because of the size and the number of children and the traffic that ensues, et cetera. They do have outside play time. It creates some noise.
At the same
Um,
time, all that is regular. What I'm looking at though is this is already, all those things, outdoor space, bathrooms, rest areas.
Yeah.
Childcare is extremely regulated by the state of California.
mhm.
And all we're doing is fixing the zoning here. We're not telling them the rest of that all falls underneath the state to regulate from my perspective.
It is the purview of the planning commission as a body to change these, if the four of you want to recommend principally permitted in all four of those residential zones, you can put that recommendation forward to the council. I do want to point out that we're actually not proposing any change in the R2 and R3
Right.
zones. You note that those are already conditionally permitted. And in fact, your commission did just approve Miss Margarita's daycare center a few months ago with a conditional use permit in the R2 zone. So that's currently operating.
Under this, under these changes, would Miss Margarita have to come back?
No.
Thank you.
So since this is basically going before the city, I mean, I guess mine for R1 and R2, and going back to what we just approved, the fact that this was just approved, and that was the example, or it's actually what I was thinking of with R2. To me, my initial thought is that I actually would recommend looking at principally permitted for R1 and R2, leave it conditional for R3 and R4. So I think we already have precedent in the city now, recent precedent, that R2 has been permitted, and it was a valid case, and it was a good discussion that went on about the issue. And I don't think that conversation would change. I think it would end up the same way, at least for the next few years. And we'd end up with the same decision-making process. And so to me, I think coming back to it, and R1 is even more so. So I would actually propose that we recommend changing R1 and R2 to permitted from conditional. Not that I don't mind having people come talk to us, but anybody's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree because R2 already permitted, so R1 should be permitted use.
Right. For daycare centers changing where it says the recommendation was to change it to conditional from so R1 is currently non-permitted. We're recommending moving it all the way to permitted. We would actually change, they picked the medium ground. And I'm just saying, no, I'd just as well go all the way. And then for R2, it's currently conditional. They recommended keeping it conditional, but I think we already have recent precedent in the city to just make that permitted. And I think that is in line with our housing element. It's in line with the direction that we've had as a city, which is always watching out and trying to provide more, especially for the population sets that are at risk. And this opens up potentially more opportunity for that. But I
likelihood that you are to request for daycare center will come, it's highly likely. And it's also highly likely that we're going to approve.
right. And that's exactly it, is why, again, I don't mind them coming and just presenting to us. I mean, whole different issue. We just went through this with California Coastal Commission on an ADU. Just because the rule said that they had to come to us, even though if you're outside that area, they never would have had to. So it gives us an attendance, but I don't know if attendance is the reason that we should not change the legislation to make it better. So, so I do think though, when you get into R3 and R4, because that starts getting into the multi-family issues, that I think at that point, we do want to have that stay conditional because I think we do want to have that discussion of larger apartments or more density, higher density level. And then it just becomes, okay, how are they going back to the noise issues, going back to those other things? How are they going to address those type situations?
Yeah.
So I think we keep R3 and R4 as conditional, which then gets into CR. So I don't have a problem leaving it where it is right now. It's well, PR, it's that one's C1. So basically everything else. So C1, and if I take this as again, what I'm thinking about is what's coming to mind are vacant, well, then now it's the dentist, but the vacant properties that sat next to Lucky's for 18 months. And both of those properties, even though they moved around the corner, those two properties sat vacant. And those would be, that would be an ideal type situation where somebody comes in and modifies it and looks at it. That if somebody wanted to modify it, there it is. You've got a resident, you've got a commercial property, and it makes sense to go ahead and give that to our developers as another opportunity to rent out their lease out their property. I mean, it opens up the opportunity to, again, use empty vacant properties that we have in the area and make sure they're filled, they stay leased, because that's going to be better for development of the city within our general plan. And because they're commercial, I mean, now in deference to, I mean, Commissioner Chang, your point on, okay, when is commercial and I think not as much on the commercial, but on the PC and on the BP side is when does that putting a childcare in, do we just approve that or not? So PC is planned commercial.
If I might, through the chair.
Yeah.
Just for a point of clarification, these commercial zoning districts that we have here are the areas, the very limited areas outside the downtown specific plan.
Right.
So these
That's true, because we
remaining,
don't have, everything now falls
it's
underneath it.
very, very limited
So
geographic locations for
Okay.
these commercial zones. Just,
because we just picked up like 80% of it all fits into that development plan, doesn't it?
right.
So, which I still don't think I think theoretically it's the same concept though. It's vacant commercial, potentially vacant commercial properties that we now open up to another avenue of simpler zoning and permitting. Right now, they're not allowed to come, that's a C1, they're not allowed to come to us. It's non-permitted. And we basically said, no, what we're doing is we're saying, we're opening this up and saying, no, why can't you do that? So I think I'm fine with C1 and C2 moving to permitted. I guess I'm trying to think, the last two are the ones that I'm not sure I want to go with permitted or make it conditional. And so the first one is planned commercial. Trying to think where are our planned commercial areas in the city right now?
Actually, we don't have that in the table that I have up. So
It's an error on the proposed zoning allowed use table. The first BP should be PC.
oh, got it. Sounds good.
So the grocery outlet shopping center
Okay.
is PC, I'm pretty sure. Actually, that's in the downtown
That's in
plan.
the new downtown.
That's in the downtown plan. Terry Talon's property up at Beach near the Walmart is
So the Walmart,
PC.
that area right there,
That's in the coastal zone.
right?
So that you'll be seeing additional stuff about that when the LCP.
I mean, we could still do that, but it would ultimately, that would have to come before, even if it's permitted, that's still gonna have to come to us because it's in the coastal zone.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
outside of that, I'm trying to think of what's left.
Along Imchin. I
So
can
I mean,
share.
it's,
Oh, no, wait, that's true.
so
But
you
yeah,
got the gas station subway area over.
Yeah,
by
there are a
Preston Park and
couple of-
Abrams.
Couple of properties over by Imgen.
And then the last couple of properties on reservation that are south of the commercial zone. So like where butchers, bacon places and those areas, because that's not part of that's outside the commercial zone.
Yeah, that's transition.
Part of the downtown plan, way out reservation.
Okay. And that there are only a few left in the city.
Yeah. All,
So it is very limited.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it, but I think it's almost like is that eventually one that just kind of will be going away. I don't even know if we even need it down the road, but that's a different conversation. So I guess I'm fine with it permitted because in the end, we just went through the list. There's only a couple properties that even qualify under PC. And one of those, the biggest one is actually within our coastal zone, and that's going to have to come before us anyway. So even if it's permitted, it's still going to be a bigger issue.
Your focus at that event coming before us, the focus should be limited to issues specific to the coastal zone, not
Right.
the city, not to the neighborhood.
So currently our PC zoning district in the coastal zone requires any uses to receive a conditional use permit, as well as a coastal development permit. That's the way our PC zoning in the coastal zone currently is written.
So that where it becomes a moot issue. And that leaves a couple others, but to your point, so let's look at Imgen because that's really about the only place that exists right now. If somebody wanted to build, actually it would be new, but that would have to be, unless you were putting it literally at the Shell gas station. Everything else would be new.
And almost all of those properties are actually publicly owned by MPC or other public entities. I mean, actually, those are great uses. A childcare center, a large childcare center is a really good use for a campus or sort of a government facility type area.
I mean, I don't have a problem leaving it as permitted. To your point, I think it's very limited, and if it comes forward, there's so many other issues that are going to have to be discussed to get it approved. That the zoning just opens up a conversation. They're still going to have to make a decision to actually try to develop it,
Just stretch it,
make it work.
to make it not work.
Oh yeah,
You have to really,
I get what you're saying.
it's more like the city council.
Them is pincushion all the time, don't we? Yes.
So what zone is MPC, are the MPC satellite right now?
That's in the specific plan for the dunes, so.
It's part of the specific plan for the dunes?
Yeah.
No.
No.
I don't believe so,
I don't think
Guido.
so. It's just
It's
outside of it.
outside the dunes specific plan.
Yeah, the dunes has its own, and then there's a small, that open area by there, and then the open field area has its own zoning, and then
place.
Cypress Knolls
PC.
has,
Its own.
it's a carve out, that to Imgen
Yeah, it's PC.
is like a standalone carve out between the dunes and Cypress Knolls.
Yeah, we think it's PC according to our zoning map.
So there used to be a daycare center there, and if
There is.
somebody wanted to go in and reopen it, that would then fall into this particular zoning.
Correct.
Right.
I think that was my only point.
Yeah, I mean, that whole area, and there's actually also the area behind the old Shopette and gas station. That's just an open field right now. That's the other kind of open space that exists. All right, so I think, are we fine with leaving PC as permitted? Sounds like we're starting to dig into it. We're finding little small plots of land around that would be opportunities. I'm fine with leaving it permitted, which then leads to the last one, which is BP, right? BP is this plan. Business park. So business park would be like we could put a daycare right next to the
Henry.
right next to the wineries.
Yep.
Hey, the baby will be happy.
Literally, we should have had this discussion. We should have done this first on the agenda before we got to the wine thing.
Yeah,
That would have changed Bill's whole conversation, which is
This
better
is
that we
a-
put this in this order.
another zoning district that is very limited.
Right.
I believe that little business park up there on Paul Davis Drive is
I think
our
that's the only one we
BP.
have.
Yes.
That's that.
Yep.
So that's where so now coming back to this, I mean, we're kind of making light of it, but given that is, I'm not as comfortable necessarily making that. And I think I would rather see that as conditional. I don't say no, but I would like, it is like, because the one area that we have as a business park is not necessarily a traditional business park. It's more like a light industrial facility.
Yes.
It is not as conducive, and I would like to see something come before us before we approve putting a daycare next to steel fabricators and wineries.
And I think that goes to Commissioner Chang's
Right,
comments earlier about neighboring compatibility.
right. So I don't say no, but yeah,
Very small.
we could.
Forcing us to argue and say, no, we just don't like it. Because that's what.
I mean, that is, I believe, the only place that's business park in the city of Marina. Okay.
Not to put it.
Right. I think you're right. The argument would be, we'd be looking at it from a negative approval perspective if it came before us, and they'd really have to justify it.
They took it. But if we had it not permitted, and they took us to court, we win.
Well, they couldn't do it. All right, I'm fine with that. I believe I'm fine with NP leaving business park as non-permitted. So if we come back to this, we have,
Let's say something.
sure.
No, basically, I just want to look at it from city planning, and we could have a childcare facility, but we don't want to see a childcare facility in between a lumber yard and a hardware store or paint shops, especially it's toxic. And then it doesn't look kind of a proper planning at all, because just like having a auto shop in the dunes, and it seems like people will say, well, what is the city planning? What is the vision of the city? And how do we do the urban planning here? So it's important to look at now it's a childcare, we're looking at it. So maybe you have to kind of set the boundary right where they're supposed to be, instead of allowing them to be, especially the C2 permit use. I look at it, I kind of worry about the repair shops, the auto sales, the plumbing shops, and then your children's there. And it doesn't blend in. I look at it as from city planning view, it doesn't blend in at all. So that's my concern. I don't know whether could we do that as a conditional use instead of a permitted use.
Yeah.
That's totally within the commission's discretion tonight to make that recommendation.
You had a comment?
My problem is,
Yeah.
suppose there wasn't some of those shops, the auto repair or the boarding kennels or whatever. Suppose they weren't there. It was a fairly new C2 development.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like a daycare center would be maybe a great corner building,
Mm.
corner.
Which I think is what
But
he's,
then 6 months later, you've got the auto repair coming in. Now, how do you tell him no?
so, and I think that's why he made it conditional. What
So
he's saying is,
if we're going to make it conditional, then what grounds do we have, legal grounds to say no?
Or could we just exclude this?
Now, if we said it's not permitted,
Yeah,
we don't need a legal ground to say no.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Through the chair, just a little clarification in the C2 zone specifically, general commercial district, under permitted uses, the big long list of uses you're referring to under A, the list ends with other uses which are similar character to those enumerated and which will not be detrimental or obnoxious to the neighborhood in which they are to be located. So there's already an expectation in an existing municipal code that operations there need to not be noxious, polluting, etc.
So
That said, also conditionally permitted uses in that zone already include certain residential uses that are ancillary to a commercial use already. So they're in the C2 zone at least, and I haven't done this exercise sitting here for the other zoning district, but there are already tools in the zoning district itself in 1720-020 that set limitations on the uses there. So for example, you have a hardware store like or a paint store. If you have a paint store that's principally permitted in the zoning district, but they're outside in the parking lot, mixing paint in some kind of noxious way or, emitting odors or excessive noise, we have code enforcement to deal with those situations. So that's just one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I just looking at the whole urban city planning and it just doesn't, just like having a auto shops and then next to a restaurants or a paint shop next to a restaurant. I know it's maybe permitted, but again, when come to the whole planning, it doesn't look matching or doesn't look.
So I think, let me give an example that I believe still exists. So Cecil Field up at Presidio of San Francisco. All the old hangars were made into some level of commercial. That's commercial businesses that are there. But at least 6 or 7 years ago, there was in one of those old buildings was a daycare. And it was basically set around for people who worked in that environment. So there was a small daycare. It was I don't know who, I have no idea who were there or not. I just remember it. I remember it being there because they had this big cosplay thing with all these characters who showed up and we were just watching it all. And I think I saw this at Love Field in Denver when they redeveloped the old Air Force Base in downtown Denver. And I've seen it in other places that have gone through BRAC cleanup areas where you have this kind of very mixed use eclectic city development on military bases, where you get into some of these light commercial industrial kind of areas. And when they redevelop, there's enough synergy of employment that gets created around it that having an on-site type of daycare becomes a benefit to the employment picture. And the other, what I'm thinking about right now is I'm just curious, what is everything by the airfield and Joby and everything, what is that zoned?
That is zoned A1 or 2. Within the airport environs, there are 2 different zoning districts that are not
They're not listed here at
included
all.
in this amendment.
Just wondering. Bring up the map. To A1 and A2. Okay. So I think that there's, now, those are all bigger areas and we're a small community. And so that made more sense because you're redoing a larger, like a flight line that had squadron buildings and all these commercial facilities that are no longer commercial or no longer military. And so they converted them into mixed use commercial. And so you had editors, developers, what they did up in Presidio, where a lot of them were artistic related, tied to the movie industry, I think. And so I could see a need for it. To your point, I don't want to have them next to each other. But I also think that there could be a need to Commissioner Change on your perspective. If we went from NP to conditional versus permitted, what becomes, to that point, what becomes kind of the restriction or the development if somebody comes in and wants to add a daycare center into one of these zones if we make it conditional use? Trying to think of what a use case looks like. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out what a use case would be in one of our C2 areas.
The use case, I'm sorry, I'm not clear what you're,
Why would a developer want to say, hey, I have a C2 area and I'm going to put a daycare center into it. So what would be the business case that somebody wants to do that? In my head, I'm trying to picture.
I've seen daycares in all sorts of random places, so it just kind of, yeah. And it's places you wouldn't even consider, so it's, yeah. So they're pretty ubiquitous, so. There's actually, there's actually one in a commercial strip about.
We're so small that we don't have a lot of those worst case examples you talk about
Okay.
in the city. But I can see it. I mean, I wouldn't want to put a daycare sandwich between a gas station, maintenance shop and a paint store either necessarily.
Yeah, and I think
But I
as a
don't think we have any
business
of those.
plan, that probably wouldn't be the best idea
Yeah.
as an operator.
No, I just bring it up, just make sure that we do exercise cautions and when we, allow any childcare in that neighborhood. Especially Marina is growing, so rapidly. The planning, maybe it's good to start at the very beginning and later on, because otherwise you see, my experience is an auto shop, especially repair shop or auto retail shop is scattered around. Then you look very kind of messy for city planning point of view. But again, once they are there, you cannot move them out. And that's why I think childcare is very important. We don't have enough childcare facility, for parents who are working. We need that, so at this time, yeah, I think we just have to be careful. That's all, be cautious. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. These are significant changes. And since we're getting ready to incorporate this will go into our new general plan, which now leads to my other last question I have on this one is, so I get our specific plans in our residential areas. So, but within the downtown vitalization plan, how does this play out and tie to our downtown vitalization plan?
Yeah, so for now, we're not contemplating putting it in the downtown. I think there was a request to not, well, we kind of want to see how the downtown plan gets implemented first, give it at least a year, and then we can come back, and staff's already keeping a memo of changes we want to make after a year after adoption. So we wanted to kind of hold off until we've had a full year of adoption. Because we did promise the council the downtown plan would be a living, kind of breathing document, but we do want to kind of see how it gets implemented in the first year. And I'm also partnering with the finance director. We're going to be doing an economic kind of analysis of the downtown plan to see how we can further encourage people to use it. So that'll probably all get packaged up later in the year. So.
Okay, all right, so we'll table that and I'll come back to it after we take a motion. So I believe, any other comments right now? All right, so I believe right now, we want to make a few changes to your recommendations. The first one is that for R1 and R2, we want to change conditional to permitted. R3 and R4, we agree with the conditions and make it conditional. CR and C1 are permitted. We talked C2 and we agree that we keep it permitted.
Yeah.
Okay, keep it permitted, knowing that there are enough requirements in the requirement that if it comes to that, we'll it'll come before us anyway. Then PC becomes permitted and BP becomes not permitted. Okay,
Perfect.
does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right, and then we still have the 300 feet, which I didn't have any specific issues on. I think that was fine of that change. All right. So here we are. I think we're at a motion.
To make daycare center permitted in the one
Hmm.
and R2 and not permitted in the BP. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Those are the three changes that we made because the other ones are already there.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So those were the three ultimate changes on top of what you had made in the initial motion and the initial presentation to us. Okay. So that reads correctly to me. Does somebody would somebody, that's even a longer one than the last one. So would somebody like to read a book tonight? Okay. Anything?
No, we're good.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay. When the head's not here, it becomes so hard. All right.
I think they're doing great.
All right.
All right, recommended motion. I move to adopt PC Resolution 2025-04, recommending that the City Council adopt the proposed amendments to Title 17, Article 1 by amending Section 17.06 and 17.12, allowing daycare centers as conditional uses in residential zones, and Section 17.18, 17.20, 17.22, and 17.24 to allow same in certain commercial zones as principally permitted uses. The ordinance also amends section 17.42.135.1 by removing the concentration restrictions for small and large family child care homes. The proposed ordinance is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section and 15061, is that right?
Should be
Okay.
section 1506 and
Okay, thank you.
of the C code.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The proposed ordinance is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15061B3 of the CEQA guidelines, with a suggested change to make daycare centers permitted in R1 and R2 and not permitted in BP. Or the business park. Okay. That's the end of it, or do we need to scroll?
No.
That's great. All right.
Yeah, second.
So motion by Vice Chair Walton and a second by Commissioner Chang.
Okay, Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Vice Chair Walton,
Yes.
Chair Woodson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
Okay. I think this will be great, and we'll be looking forward to seeing how the city council discusses this whenever it comes up between them. So I am pretty confident it will be a lively conversation that will last much longer than it did for us. And that's okay. That's why. All right. So this was a really important thing, which I think is coming back to the long-term development of the city. It opens up opportunities for people to create new childcare and daycare facilities, which should help our community in the long run. So I think this even more than the inclusionary housing will be a big change for us. Okay. Next up, we have two informational items for tonight. One's targeted amendments to the zoning ordinance.
That's me.
That's Nick.
It figures the proposed changes address environmental approvals for beer and wine, not making any personal statements whatsoever.
That's one of many. As Guido mentioned earlier, he keeps memos to help us guide our changes. He's mentioned the downtown revitalization specific plan, but this is more general since Guido and I started working together. And all the other planners as well, not just the two of us, but all the other planners here and who have worked with us in the past. We make note of when we're working on at the counter or working with applicants or working with you here at the Planning Commission, what's working and what might need tweaking throughout the years. So we have proactively looked at ways to make it so we can better serve customers, be more efficient, more transparent, update our standards to align with best practices, and make it more easier for the public to use the zoning ordinance. And so there's a lot of changes here. We're bringing this to you as an informational item first, and then we're going to come back with an actual staff report, and you'll see the track changes eventually. So first and foremost, the Guido came before you recently to propose staff level review for administrative design review. And so this would work off of that. It would add to it. It would add administrative use permits as well as minor variances. So, if you have a customer who comes, we've had a handful of variances for front yard setback, maximum front yard setbacks for retaining walls that are over 6 feet in height, stuff like that, where there's no contentious public thing. And then also if there's minor changes to something, 10% or less. And in this chapter, it provides the framework for noticing the public, the process of staff level review. It gives Guido the authority to, or whoever the community development director is, to push it up to the planning commission if they see that, if it's something that they deem to have public interest. So it defines the process, and it makes it clearer for staff and for the public. One of our sections of our code that is pretty confusing is our fence regulations. And so, there's a standard for homes that were built and created after 1997. Then there's a standard for homes created prior to 1997. This is a classic way of doing zoning ordinances where you have semblances that have the history. So we're looking to create a simpler option where it's removing that 2 different ordinances for 2 different lots created at 2 different times. And we're looking to make it more user friendly. We do already have this visibility triangle in the Public Works code under 10.70. And so this would be pulling it into the planning code. We're not changing anything with this. We're adding a graphic. We're putting it right into the fences section. So that way it's very clear, because Public Works doesn't really talk to people about fences, planning does. And so this is giving us a tool to say, yeah, you can build a fence, but it can't block people's visibility at the corner. So this is a safety thing. And then currently there's no regulations for garden structures. As I was reviewing other fence ordinances, I noticed that we don't have a definition for garden structures. So that's going to be something like a gazebo or a pergola or something like that. And then we also noticed that there's no prohibition on razor wires or, so we added something to that effect as well. We just recently adopted a blight ordinance a few years ago. And so in that there's temporary fencing. So we just wanted to codify that. And then our general plan speaks about not having gated communities in the city of Marina. So I wanted to make sure that gets into the zoning ordinance because we're required to do that. So a lot of changes. Now we're getting into yard regulation changes. So this is going to be your accessory structures not intended for living, not, purposes. We want to bring those in line with our ADU ordinance, making it so that they have a 4-foot side and rear yard setback. And then create an administrative use permit review if someone wants to get closer than that. So look at that on a case by case basis, seeing, what are the conditions that we would allow for that. And then in the city of Marina, we have a stormwater requirement where every property is required to retain all of its stormwater on site. We have sandy soil here, so rain percolates into the soil very quickly. And so we wanted to ensure that people are not paving their entire property and creating a public nuisance by all the rainwater going into the street and into other people's yards and not doing their role of retaining the stormwater, which goes into our aquifers, right? So this is to help with on-site retention, water retention, and then also to prevent nuisances and code enforcement cases in the future. And so this is a requirement that yards can't be paved with impermeable surfaces more than 50%. And so that's, asphalt, any sort of hardscape. So this is the garden structures. We would add a definition in the definitions chapter, and then we would show that they were permitted in R1, R2, R3, and R4 districts. And then it just clarifies, that these small garden structures are permitted. Yeah. We also, in this targeted approach towards looking through the zoning ordinance, and we noticed that there are some provisions in there, like R1 still has private stables. When you look up what the requirements are to have a private stable in R1, you have to have at least a 1 acre lot. To my knowledge, we don't have any 1 acre lots anymore in the R1 zoning district. So, and if we do, they're coming to our counter and asking how they can subdivide them into housing, into single family homes. We have a few mentions of the B district, I think also the K district. So we're just deleting these things that they're no longer zoned. We don't have a zoning. There's no chapter. There's no B zoning district chapter anymore in our ordinance. That got cleaned up about 10 years ago. And there's just a few little places that they missed. So, and then as part of that staff level review, in the memo that we've been keeping, we did have a note there that we brought to you, 2 or 3 of these beer and wine permits when they're incidental to food service at restaurants, and didn't have anyone from the public. The police didn't have any issues. So we figured we can do like a staff level administrative use permit, give them the conditions of approval that you'd see in our normal staff reports, but it would really help small businesses with that. And then we are going to separate height and fences. Most modern zoning ordinances have their own fence section, and updating accessory structure height in all residential districts. So we're just really trying to clean it up, make everything much simpler and more transparent for the public. So I went over a lot, and I'm going to turn it back to the chair for technical questions and any input the planning commission wants to give to staff.
Sure, thanks. There's a lot. It's going to be a lot more when it comes back to us with all the changes. And some of those, I mean, we've talked about a few of these things, like I remember the conversation on private stables. So I think that was the same conversation we had when we were discussing chickens and roosters, and why do we have roosters in our city, which we're not supposed to. All right. Anybody have specific kind of comments to staff or that you want to raise on these? I have a couple of thoughts, but I'll let you guys provide input first. Good. Okay. I'll start at the end. So on the beer and wine permits, I just think, because I know the city council has raised this issue, they don't completely agree with this. They like it to come through the planning commission mainly because they like it to then come from us to them. And so there's a part of me that agree. Small business that's currently in operation and they just want to go to beer and wine. Beer and wine is different than liquor. It just is. And adding beer or wine increases an opportunity to increase business flow through. And it may be the difference for especially smaller businesses, especially our smaller restaurants that struggle in their first few years. It's an opportunity that could help them survive. So there's a part of me that says, okay, if we make this administerial, then that's great. We're just supporting that bigger picture. Then there's the side of me that says I also have watched the discussions at the city council level on this issue before, and that's something that they still like to have control over from decision making. And so, I guess what it comes down to is the changes that we make or that you make are going to come before us, and like everything else, we would make recommendations and it goes before the city council and then they get to approve or disapprove. So just, I would say on this one is on the beer and wine, just be cognizant of the fact that there is a real theory of where beer and wine should be approved or disapproved. And it usually is not going to be at the administrative level in the city of Marina right now. Just think about it and be able, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think you're going to have to be able to support that. Because I think what'll happen is it'll come back to us. We will probably approve it. Just because I've kind of seen how we go in the commission here, but it's going to get to the city council and the city council is going to have a lot of questions. So you'll have to really justify that specific item. Definitions back on garden structures, flagpoles. Flagpole is considered part of a garden structure, correct?
No, it is not.
A light pole from like a public right of way?
No, flag. Like
A
in a
flagpole.
big American flagpole with a flag sitting on top of it. That is 10 feet by 15 feet.
I don't, yeah.
I'll have to take a look at that, but that, yeah.
So I guess that would be the guidance is that I don't think we've had an issue in the city of Marina, but I totally, in today's environment of extremes, can see somebody coming in and saying, oh, let me add this 30-foot flagpole with this 15-foot flag.
Okay.
That's a
I
good
just-
point,
I'm-
Chair. That's a good point. And that's why we're bringing this stuff to you guys early. That's something I had not thought of. So thank you that's something we'll have to consider. And obviously there's some First Amendment rights there. So we'll have to confer with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it
Yeah.
is, and I don't know if
So-
it's
so I-
personal use or what.
So I apologize because we're not bringing you the actual code and the
I
actual
know.
definitions. The definition of a garden structure is very small,
Right.
and it's, not to exceed, 6 feet or 8 feet.
It's like a picture.
It's small. They're not large, and they're small in square footage. And it's talking more about like a trellis, and there's a definition of it, and it does not include flagpole.
All right.
So,
There's a limit on height for these garden structures.
correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
you can, then I guess my request back to staff is, since we're looking at garden structures, if we're looking at ornamental changes
Mhm.
to a property, then to me, the garden structures is one, flagpoles is another.
Yeah.
Those are the typical things that you would see. And the third may be like garden beds and things like that, which obviously that's not really a concern because they're small. But
Yeah.
if you could just look at that at the same time.
Yeah.
Because I think like I said, we have flagpole, there are a number of people in the city of Marina who put flagpoles out. I have one that's sitting on my front porch. If I just had to, I'd figure out how I'm building it.
Yeah.
So I'm just.
Yeah, we do already have a section in the municipal code that does allow for a use permit to exceed the height in the residential zone, because that's how we did the cell tower at Cypress Knolls.
Mhm.
It was a use permit because, it's an 89-foot tall.
Right, but that's a commercial,
Cell
I mean,
tower.
that's a very different situation. We're specifically looking at garden structures, which is in residential areas.
Yeah.
And if you could
Yeah.
just add this to it. 'Cause
I'll look into it, and I'll get back to you. Mhm.
I'm just
Yep,
curious.
that's
'cause-
why we're bringing it
and
today.
I
as a
will
study. Yeah.
I will say this because in my own personal defense of how I'm like decorate for the holidays. When my wife and I are looking at putting the flagpole into our yard, because we also are changing some of our Christmas decorations around, we're gonna dual use the pole and make it extendable, but the height of it was like, okay, how big do we want the pixel tree that we're putting in? And if I put a pixel tree in that is 30 feet tall, it can be seen from Imgen from my house, which is very cool because then you can sit on Imgen, you can find my house, at least during the holidays. But what we came down to was, okay, putting a 30-foot flagpole in front of our yard is a little bit outsized for the other 8.5 months of the year. So we made a decision not to, but that doesn't mean that that somebody else wouldn't decide to put that in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Consider it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just, I mean, I'm asking. Okay, yard regulations. I just understand the bullet. Mirror fences with staff level review for fences closer than 4 feet. I'm assuming you're mirroring the regulations on the fence regulations, is what you're trying to say? I'm trying to understand that bullet.
Let me see. That's for the accessory dwelling units. So yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned, I failed to mention in the previous slide that for fences, right now, if someone wants to build a fence that's over 6 feet in height, or a retaining wall that's over 3 feet in height with a fence on top that's 6 feet in height. We've had the situations where people have slopes that are greater, that require a retaining wall that's greater than 3 feet in combination with a fence. And let's say it's 4 feet. And so they can't build that retaining wall with a fence on top without a variance. And so they've had to redesign their site extensively to make it work. And so what we decided to propose is making that administrative design review for those types of situations where a fence needs to be slightly taller or the retaining wall needs to be slightly taller, up to 8 feet for the fence, and then expanding it so that the retaining wall can be up to 4 feet. And then if it wants to go beyond that, then there's, so it's mirroring that section so that if you have an accessory structure where right now we get a lot of accessory structures that are in the side yard setback in a way where it was built 20 years ago and it comes up through a residential property inspection and then it becomes a code enforcement issue. And so we want to make it so if there's a situation where it's not impacting neighbors, it's not impacting the neighborhood, that we can look at that on a case by case basis, staff level, and review it.
Okay.
So
Yes,
that's what the
we can put
bullet
that in
point
there.
is
We can
talking
have a
about.
discussion about it, and I'll save all my opinions on that till later. My next door neighbor has a house that is turned sideways. Well, no, the way that they got it bought off on is that the side door is now the main door, which then treated the fence
Front
on the
yard.
front as a side fence,
Mhm.
which meant it no longer needed to be 4 feet, it could be 6 feet. It's sitting on a terraced lot that has a 3-foot drop. So it's a 9-foot aggregate fence.
Yeah, I will say
So-
that in my entire planning career in multiple jurisdictions, this issue with retaining wall and a fence on top is literally one of the most complicated
Yeah,
things I
so-
repeatedly have to deal with. And in Marina, there's a lot of slope in Marina, so this is actually a very
It
common
actually comes up a lot.
occurrence.
I mean, I can think of so many neighborhoods, so many houses and neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Within a few blocks of my house.
Yeah.
that Run into this challenge, especially because of the way that the houses are turned and situated of what is considered the main entrance versus the side, the front versus the side. Is atypical of what you look at, and like, oh, that's the front of the house. Like, no, actually officially it's the side of the house.
Right.
So yeah, I would love to see, looking forward to seeing how this comes back, because I mean, we've talked about it before, and I think it is something that we can go over. The only other one, yeah.
I have a question, Nick,
Mhm.
other than the fence structure heights, the restrictions, how about the color?
Yeah, we don't have anything about color of
So
fences.
if someone want to paint color,
We don't have currently we don't have anything
So we don't have. zoning
about that
ban
right
on-
now, like R1.
No.
We have
you
no.
look into it?
Yeah, I mean, if you live in a HOA, the HOA usually has rules about that. But if you live in an area that doesn't have an HOA, then we don't have any in the city of Marina about painting your fences.
You cannot restrict them.
We
No.
don't currently restrict it.
The only way we could do it is if we had added that as one of our objective design standards. I believe, but even then, we talked about it at one point, but then that doesn't make we figured it wouldn't have flown. If there was a challenge to it.
I'm not familiar with other cities regulating painting fences. I could look into it.
So we're,
I'm in the HOA. I'm on the board of directors of the HOA, and it is a headache.
Yeah, I'm gonna say that not even the city of Pacific Grove regulates fence paint.
So, but I can tell you,
Ah.
I can tell you a city that, I can tell you a city that did. It's not Pacific Grove, it's Seaside. Remember?
Yes.
I don't, and it started with a boat. I can't have my boat in my driveway. And, okay, so I'm not gonna put my boat there. I'm gonna put a fence in, and then I'm gonna paint my fence to look like my driveway with my boat. So it absolutely came up. I mean, that put Seaside on the national news for almost 2 weeks
That's
when that
hilarious.
happened. Oh, it's still there. It's a beautiful painting that the artist who came in and did. It looks like a real boat is like there, but so I can kind of see the issue. I don't know. I don't think that's what you specifically are tying to because that's art. But
That's
all right.
cool.
So thank you for doing that. Any other comments? If not, then the other item we had was community development block grant summary. And where that
Yeah,
stood.
that's me, but Nick, I just want to make sure we accurately captured. So there was a follow-up in terms of flagpole. It looks like you've addressed that, but we'll research that more. Apparently we will research painting fences. That'll be an interesting research project.
No,
No.
we don't. No,
Okay.
no, we're not gonna go down. We have no desire to go down to painting fences.
Okay. Sounds good.
No.
This is more for me so that I can follow.
No.
And then in terms of, it seems like we clarified what a gazebo structure is. And
He's gonna look up the flagpoles as a secondary thing
Side
that wasn't in the presentation.
okay.
So.
And in terms of the chair mentioned that we might get some pushback on the beer and wine as an administrative use permit. So that's duly noted. So, okay. Were those the big, just because what Nick's going to do is he's going to use this study session item to go back and research that stuff. And then we're trying to come back in May-ish or so. And then kick it up to council in June-ish. So.
All right.
I think we have one member of the public and we do need to do public comment if we haven't yet.
Okay, absolutely. Sure, we can open up the public comment on this item if there's any other topics. I didn't know, I mean, Seth, I mean, a point of clarification. I didn't know on the informational briefs that we had to open up that section up to public comment. I don't mind.
Yeah, it's typically for every item on the agenda.
Okay.
You know, people don't
Fine.
usually comment on anything but action items, but this one we talked about quite a bit, so seems
That's
fair.
fine.
Yeah.
So go ahead and open the public comment if whoever's here would like to provide comment. Okay. The cat still. We'll close public comment. We have to teach the cat to talk. All right. The next thing is, so we've got the dot memo. Rita.
Thank you. Appreciate
So
that.
we've got the vote one. Do you want to?
No, I wanted to confirm that this was kind of the will of the commission. Still doing outreach on this item. Nick has been very helpful. He actually helped create a Survey Monkey. We have over 50 people who've responded. And so I just wanted to make sure that I accurately captured kind of what were the dot votes. And then Sep after reached out to me and said, hey, you guys voted. We should probably, for transparency purposes, share what the votes were, just if people ask. So just that's the purpose of the memo. So hopefully this captured accurately what people represented to us at the last meeting.
And I think that was, all right, I glanced through it very quickly. I thought this was also in the minutes for last month too. And I just realized that I didn't actually check. To make sure.
Remember, no, I don't think we put it in. I think we had, if you look on the minutes, there's
Okay.
just like a 3-sentence.
We just we addressed it, but we didn't actually put the votes count in there.
Right. And like I said, it was, the legal advice was, hey, for transparency, since people at home didn't get to see per se the votes, then we should at least share it
Oh,
tonight.
no, I completely agree. I think mine is, I think this is just for mine in the future reference. And I didn't catch this either because I would have if I had thought about this more and not been selfish about reading the minutes, I would have realized what we probably could have done was just added the vote tally into the minutes, and that would have formally documented everything into the minutes. But we've approved the minutes now, so having this as a separate memo works. But if we do this again, then since that's part of the official meeting, then we could just add the count into the meeting minutes next time around if we ever do this
Absolutely,
again.
absolutely. That's definitely more streamlined. That's a good point.
And that way it becomes formal record instead of having a separate document that's still public record, but not as easily accessible.
Right, exactly. That makes sense. That makes total sense.
But I mean, yeah, when I looked at the numbers, I mean, I think we all saw that the preponderance of infrastructure improvements, but then the infill development, the city property was really, I mean, that was where we put most of our emphasis and discussion. I think if you had labeled the dots 1 to 5 from a weighting perspective, you would have found that most of the infill was our primary. That was where we were focused on for our first and second votes for most people.
Right.
So hopefully I've passed my comments along to the city council on that. So hopefully they will take that side seriously. I'm not sure the conversations. I don't know if the rest of you have followed some of what's going on with the public meetings about this and what they've been thinking about. A lot of people did not think of it that way. They've thought about lots of things that can be bought and built, but they weren't thinking at it from the same perspective that we had a conversation on. Not negative, but there's definitely a more along the lines of, hey, let's just add a sidewalk here, or let's fix, it's very particular to specific areas. Right. And I don't think that a lot. Right. And so I think I think my takeaway that I mentioned to Brian at one point was that was the perspective that we looked at it from a planning commission. All right. Okay, staff and major project updates.
Yeah, actually, Allison is going to be running point for the next big meeting. So for April 24th, Allison, do you want to share?
Oh, yes. Your next meeting will be a joint study session with the city council on April 24th on the general plan update. Talking about draft policies for all of the chapters. So I believe tomorrow I'm going to be able to do my friendly little email to the council and commission combined and share the document that has the draft policies, so you can all start studying. And then we'll get the actual staff report and the consultant's presentation out a little bit later. But I just want to make sure it's 16 pages worth of draft policies. So I wanted to make sure everybody had enough time. That meeting's going to start at 5:30.
Okay, so I was going to ask is what
Yeah.
time does it start?
Yeah, that's going to start at 5:30 here in the council chamber. Matt Ramey will be doing his presentation. Yeah, it should be good.
I'm going to ask. It's been a while. Last time we did this, it went on for a while. Moving on to like
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
And
Yeah.
that's why, yeah, so we're starting a little early because Matt does drive from Berkeley for these meetings, so we try to make these efficient.
We're paying him. so-
And we're paying him, but you know,
Well, we don't pay you to drive back and forth from the Bay Area, so.
No.
At least we don't pay you enough, especially now. So I am going to put that out there. I mean, the expectation for all of us is going to be that is going to be a long night with a lot of conversation that will go on. So for those, and a couple of you have, well, you have not. Both of you sat in on the last one. I think you were here. Yeah. So
It's a long session.
it is a long session.
well, the general plan update
It's a
sessions are
general plan
pretty
update, and it's-
weighty.
Yeah. There's a lot
Um,
of information and the council will have a lot of input and comments on it.
yeah.
So
I am going to politely request that everybody does their homework ahead of time and just bring like specific items because we are not planning on going word by word every single policy down the list. We'll be providing kind of,
I was going to ask you if you could, if you could create a set of rules.
I'm gonna have rules in my email.
Thank you.
Don't you worry. But yeah, it's
No,
it's
and I mean,
really,
it's a good thing to have to focus us on what it is that our goals and objectives are for this meeting. So that we
Yeah.
actually are coming out of this with the right set of recommendations to
Yes.
our contractor.
Yep.
So,
We will have a hard copy documents, right?
yes, I'll provide hard copies to whoever requests them.
I
Yeah.
mean, I can tell you right now, I would, like last time, I would like this is one of the few that I would like a hard copy because I take enough notes on.
No problemo.
Thank you.
That's the big staff announcement.
Yay. That's a big one. All right, correspondence? None.
Not at this time.
All right. So I guess that's it. So this ended up being a longer meeting than planned. So the duck.
Oops.
Meeting is wow, that duck didn't do anything, it didn't quack or anything. So I hit the duck, Rito, and the duck just did nothing.
All right. Sounds good.